Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I know that I'm very late with my best of 2024 products, but I couldn't let this video pass me by strictly because I feel like 2024 was a really transformative year for me in terms of makeup. I feel like I started to really hone in on the things that I truly love. I noticed a lot of little things that work the best for me, a lot of combinations that were just elite, and I didn't want to not talk about these things with you guys. I do want to let you guys know that I'm not going to be covering any lip products. I did do a best lip products of 2024 video already, as well as a most complimented lip combos video that kind of encompass all of, well, mainly all of my favorite lip products. So I will link those in the description box down below for you guys. But let's start off with some brow products. The Rare Beauty Flexible Brow Gel. This is just a transparent liquid wax brow gel, and it truly has been a super big game changer for me this year. This has been something that I have repurchased because it just works so well. I think this being more of a liquid wax formulation really allows my very stubborn brow hairs to actually lay in place, and I'm able to shape my brows the way that I want them to be, but it also dries down just enough to where my brows actually stay. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that this liquid wax can tend to be a little heavy in a good way because it does dry down and it like keeps my brows in place. There are very few brow gels that actually hold my brows in place, and this one has been the most malleable for me, and I love it because I can use other brow products with it and it doesn't get crunchy like ever because it's more of that like liquidy, more malleable wax texture. On the opposite end of that, sometimes when I wanted a super long, very like strong brow gel, this one from Anastasia, this is the Brow Freeze Gel, the liquid version. I do not like the potted one. That one just doesn't really hold my brows in place, but this one is insane. This is a beast. It keeps my brows in place all day. Now it can get a little bit crunchy if you are not careful. You do want to go in with a very small amount of this. It does have like two different types of bristles in here, but for the most part I use the longer bristles, and I will already have my brows shaped maybe with something like the Rare Beauty brow gel, and then I'll have it all done with like my brow pencil or brow pen, and then this would be my last step. And I like to take this just on the tips of my brows and keep it in place, and this locks my brows in place all day. You want to do this probably, I would say, the first step, because if this like mixes with your foundation or concealer or whatever you have on your complexion, it can get a little bit like balled up and pilly. Now for the things that I like to use to fill in my brows and get that really nice fluffy look. First off is a brow pen. I've talked about this multiple times. This one is actually from Maybelline. It's the Build-A-Brow, and this one is in the shade Black Brown. I thoroughly enjoy this brow pen, mainly because it is going to be a brush tip, and that tip is so insanely thin, but even though it's very thin, it deposits a really even layer of pigmentation. I never feel like it's too much. I never feel like it bleeds onto the skin, and I just like this to give my brows a little bit more of almost a more natural look, because I kind of like to make longer strokes and shorter strokes so it looks more like a natural hair. I love that I can get in between my actual brow hairs to be able to make these strokes. It's just incredible, and it's at a great price point, very comparable to a lot of high-end brow pens, and I really prefer this one over any of those. And I don't even use this side, to be honest. I don't find that this brow sealer does anything for me, but I will definitely continue to purchase this just for the pen, and the pen does last a very long time. I talk about this very consistently. This is the Kosas Brow Pop Nano in the shade Brown Black, and I love this micro, or I guess nano, eyebrow pencil. I think this is great not only because of the size of this brow pencil, but also the actual formulation of it. So I find that it's the perfect ratio of creamy and more waxy. I find that it's easy to deposit the actual pigmentation, but it's not too creamy to where it just looks like I smudge on color. It still can achieve those brow hair strokes, you know, and it gives more definition than actual like filling in of the brows, if that makes sense. And that's typically what I prefer. I feel like it's easier to build the brow up that way and go at it a little bit more carefully and detailed. I've gone through multiple of these this year and I believe last year too. Next is a primer that I've actually gone through one bottle already of, and it is the Cali Ray So Blown Blurring Primer. This is such a great hydrating and blurring primer, and I think that it is very ideal for someone that has oily skin. I don't think that this is exclusive to those that have oily skin, but I do think that it's going to be one that works really well if you have oily skin, but you find that mattifying primers are just like too much for your taste. I am someone that still likes a good natural glow, a little bit of dew on the skin, even though I have oily skin, but I like something that starts me off a little bit more matte, and this is perfect for that. It has a little bit of a silicone texture to it, but it does have sort of a creamy texture as well. Like I said, I think it's really hydrating on the skin, but it dries down so it doesn't leave you greasy, and it's perfect for those of us that have oily skin because of that. And I do find that this does fill in my slightly more porous areas like around my nose without being too much, and it never looks heavy or cakey in those areas. I won't say that this is, again, the most mattifying primer, but I do think that it helps my makeup last a tiny bit longer. And I've also used this on no makeup days when I just want to kind of like blur the skin a little bit, and it's great for that. Next is something that I would say came at the tail end of 2024 for me, but it really just like blew me out of the water. It is the Merit Great Skin Priming Moisturizer. I did not expect to like this as much as I did. It really feels like a very hydrating moisturizer, but again, this does not leave my oily skin feeling extremely greasy at the end of the day, or even when I'm putting my makeup on. I know a lot of people like to go in with a really rich base of moisturizer, and I like that sometimes, but I do find that if I need my makeup to last longer throughout the day, I'm gonna have to use something that's a little in between, something that's really moisturizing and going to allow my makeup to just glide on, and something that is going to also dry down and not get in the way of the longevity of my makeup. And this just hits all of those points for me. I was sent this in PR and I had no intention of trying it on my own, but I will say that I am very inclined to say that once I finish this primer, I'm most likely going to purchase it myself because I find that it is that good. Lastly for primers is going to be the Danessa Myricks Blurring Balm. This is just the universal one, and I found that this one was the most ideal one for me when I wanted to blur those pores and really like mattify the skin without it looking heavy and cakey. I find that this layers incredibly well when I have like a full glam event type of makeup day, but it also works extremely well when I'm having an everyday makeup day. This is just so multitasking. I think that it works incredibly well with all of the makeup that I've tried it with. It works really well also if you are someone that tends to get a little bit greasier, maybe you're using formulas such as creams and you find that those don't necessarily stay on the skin as well throughout the day. This kind of locks that in a little bit more. And kind of in the same vein, it does help a lot with oil control because it has that upslate in it. You need such a small amount, and it also pairs really well with other primers that you may want to use. Maybe you want to use something like the Merit Priming Moisturizer all over the face, and then this just in your more porous areas. It is great for that too. Next, I want to talk about color correctors very briefly because I talk y'all's ears off about this product in particular. This is the Sigma color corrector in the shade medium to dark. So you do have two different color correcting shades in here, and I find that this is so perfect to customize your color corrector. I do have different pigmentation all throughout my face. My acne scarring is different from my sunspots, which is different from my under eye, dark circles. So it's really nice to have one product that you can really customize for all of those different areas. I find that this texture is perfect for my preferences. It is slightly creamy when you blend it onto the skin, but as you kind of thin it out, it does become a little bit tackier and the pigmentation stays on the skin. So you never have to worry about the actual color color correcting shade going away when you put anything on top of it, like foundation and concealer. The next color corrector I don't actually have with me physically because I have finished it up, I think like mid-year, but I did want to mention it. The Bobbi Brown color corrector in the shade Peach was definitely a favorite. I would say that that one was slightly thicker than the Sigma one, but it gave me the same amount of pigmentation. Actually, it gave me more pigmentation than the Sigma one, which was really great. And it stayed in place again, so I never had to worry about it just like slipping and sliding on the face. And it was a great like intro into color correctors. I feel like it made such a big difference, especially for my acne scar. I actually have a handful of foundations that really set the standard for me this year. And the first one being our Viral Tear Cushion Foundation. I have this in the shade 27N Camel, but I also was using the shade 29N, I think Natural Beige, throughout most of the year when I was very tan. And this is an incredible foundation. It does slightly oxidize on the skin, so I would recommend trying this out if you have an opportunity to before you commit to like the full size. But I love the way that this dries down on the skin. It really gives you such a perfected, almost airbrush look to the skin, but in a way it also looked like you were wearing foundation because the skin was so perfected. Do you know what I mean? It gave so much coverage and still looked quite natural in terms of the finish, so it was more of like that satin matte finish, I want to say. At least this one. I did compare the pink cushion, red one, and silver one to each other. I will link that down below in the description if you're curious to see like the difference with all of them. But I loved how little product you actually had to apply onto the skin to get that full coverage. It is just such a good one, and it lasts all day on the skin. Someone had mentioned to me before that this is meant to be used without having to set it with like powders and setting spray and all that stuff. So I have been testing it out just wearing this foundation, putting all of my other products on top, but skipping like my finishing powder and my setting spray. And this actually holds up really nicely. And it almost looks better at the end of the day because my natural skin kind of like gets to peek through, but the skin still looks perfected. So if you have this, maybe you find that sometimes this can look a little heavy, try just not setting it. I know that sounds kind of wild if you're like me and you always set like your entire face of makeup, but that worked for me, so it might work for you. Next is something that I have loved since it has released. I have a full foundation wear test and like first impression of this, but it is the Haus Labs Tri-Clone Skin Tech Foundation. This is in the shade 260 Light Medium Cool. I recently talked about this in my makeup declutter video. I did declutter my old bottle and then I opened a new one, but this is the perfect shade match for me. It looks so good on the skin. This is going to be the foundation that I use when I need something to stay all day. I'm pretty sure that I used this foundation for all of the weddings that I attended this year, for all of like my big events that I attended this year, because it is just my most reliable full glam. I can say that in quotes, full glam, because for me, I think this is pretty full coverage, full glam foundation. It gives me just a healthy skin finish. That's how I like to describe this. It gives you a little bit of a hydrated natural finish, but I think that it's meant to be a little bit more like a satin matte finish. But for me, throughout the day, this just looks better and better. My remaining foundations are actually stick foundations that again came in at the later half of the year, starting off with the LYS foundation stick. I have this one in the shade TG1. I will say that for me currently, this is a little bit too warm, a little bit too golden, but other than that, the actual formula of this, again, I have a full video talking about it. It's definitely going to be more on the hydrating side. So if you do have oily skin like I do, this is going to be something you are gonna need to set. I think that even when I set this with powder, it still looks incredible on the skin. Every time I wear this, I feel like I have such a good makeup day. It looks extremely hydrating on the skin. It just gives you that healthy skin glow. It also seems like it sort of like blurs the skin, especially when I go in with the stick and then I blend it out with my fingers. That allows me to really blend it out into a very thin layer, and it just looks like you have perfected skin. It's incredible, and I also feel like this is at a great price point for the things that it can deliver on the skin. And I think that I'm very partial to this stick foundation as well as the next one because I traveled a lot in 2024. So being able to just chuck this into my makeup bag and not have to worry about like a glass foundation bottle or something like that taking up a room, this was like perfect for that. And the remaining foundation is actually this one. This one kind of pains me if I'm being quite honest. This is, I think, my most expensive foundation purchase from 2024. It is the Dior Forever Skin Perfect Skin Tint in the shade 3N. I have talked in length about this one, how sometimes it can be a little olive for me. I do think that Dior does fall short in this shade range because it is very limited, which I don't really understand why, because their other foundations, they have like 40 plus shades. I'm really hoping that they expand the shade range because it's kind of abysmal if I'm being honest. But this one, when I first got it, it was almost a perfect match for my skin, which was really jarring because it was one of those moments where I swiped it on my skin and I was like, whoa, where'd it go? But other than that, this also has a little bit of like a semi-matte finish on my skin, and I actually prefer to blend this into my skin using my fingers. I feel like it really melts the product in and it just looks like, again, perfected skin. It provides a very even, perfected base for the rest of my makeup, and I really enjoy that with foundations. I like something these days that is going to be thin, but it's gonna give me like an even canvas to work with, and this did just that. I do think this has a little bit of a blurring property to it as well. Whenever I use this on my more porous areas, I almost feel like it blurs those areas in a way, and this just melts into the skin like butter, but it doesn't feel greasy like butter. So that is a definite plus for me. I feel like this finish is very universal. I think people with dry skin up to people with oily skin will find a way to make this look beautiful. I do like to set this with powder, but I do find that I can get away with very minimal setting. Like I don't necessarily have to bake my face in order to make this look good throughout the day. This does have a little bit longer of a longevity than the LYS stick, but less longevity than the House Labs and the Tear Tear. This year for me, I would say, was the year of concealers. I really leaned into concealers, and I also found that for the majority of the year, I was just using concealer all over my face in place of foundations on an everyday basis because there were just so many good ones in my opinion. So the first one that I want to talk about is definitely a holy grail. It is the Kulfi Main Match Concealer. I wear the shade Mango Drop. This is such a good color match for me. I find that this is definitely a more hydrating finish. I think that it gives me that very glowy, just of my skincare type of glow, but it gives me the perfection that I need from a concealer when it comes to like the coverage, you know? It doesn't emphasize any darkness on my skin, like it doesn't gray out any of like my dark circles or my acne scarring or anything. It completely covers it even when I'm not using any color corrector. It is hydrating without that extra grease. I do find that I need to set this down, so keep that in mind if you again have, I would say, normal to combo to oily skin. And I find that it does set down perfectly well. I don't think that it like moves around and gets greasy on the skin throughout the day. It definitely stays put and it looks flawless. Another one, this one kind of caught me off guard because I actually owned this for quite a while before I started using it and really loving it. It is the Milk Makeup Future Fluid Concealer. I have the shade 15NW. This is going to be a hydrating concealer as well, but less hydrating than the Kulfi one. I would say that this one, if I use it in a thin layer, it does have the potential to actually dry down on its own, but for extra security, I always just powder my face. This would definitely be one of my favorite foundation replacement concealers. I loved using this all over my skin. It gave me such a beautiful finish. It was never greasy. It didn't look cakey. It's not heavy. It's a very thin concealer, but it has great pigmentation behind it. I think that the shade range is actually quite nice. I like the nuance of the neutral warm. And again, this is one that's going to set down with powder very well. But if you don't have oily skin, I actually could see this not being set down and still wear really well. The next one I actually decluttered because it was definitely breaking me out because it was old, but I'm going to repurchase this one. It is the Urban Decay Quickie Concealer. I have this in the shade 50NN, and I love this concealer. Again, as kind of a foundation replacement concealer, it works so well all over the skin. It definitely was a thinner formula, but very high coverage. This finish to me was the closest one to being a skin-like finish, and it was almost so thin that it thinned out to where it looked like you weren't wearing anything on the skin. It was incredible. And again, something that is important for me is that it sets down well, and this one set down flawlessly. Another concealer that I actually received in PR, and I was kind of like, okay, I'll try it, but I ended up loving it, was this one. This is the Bare Minerals Bare Pro 16-hour wear concealer. I don't know about the 16-hour wear claim, but this one, it's good. I definitely think that if you love a matte concealer, this is gonna be the one for you. It stays looking flawless on the skin. I have this one in a few shades, but the shade that I use mostly is medium 300 neutral. I like this as a brightening concealer. So I'll go in with a skin tone matching concealer like the Milk Makeup one under my eyes, and then I will top it with this one, and it just adds that extra brightness that sometimes I really crave in my makeup. If you love a bright under eye, this one is going to give it to you. This pairs really well with all of my foundations, all of my concealers. I do find that for my preferences, I like to use this when I have more of a hydrated base of primer. Lastly, for concealers, the Fenty Beauty concealers, these released at the very beginning of 2024, and I have been loving these consistently. I know that some people really did not like these, and at first I thought, okay, these are a little bit too hydrating for me, but I actually, again, love using this concealer as a foundation replacement, but I also sometimes use this on my actual like face as concealer. I find that when you thin this out and you get it very thin, it sets down actually quite nice on the skin, and I really like these shade matches. I kind of hate the packaging though. I don't like that I can't like sit it up whenever I have it organized in my makeup collection. I have to just like lay them down, which is kind of annoying, but that's just a nitpicky thing, I think. This concealer definitely is not for my matte lovers. This is gonna give you a lot of hydration, a lot of dew. Out of the ones that I've spoken about so far, this concealer is going to be the one that's going to give you the most like dewy dumpling face of makeup. I think it sets down better on the actual face versus the under eyes, but sometimes I still will use this on the under eyes, and I will layer it with something like the Bare Minerals, which is a little bit more matte. I feel like I go on sort of a journey with bronzers every year, and this year I really enjoyed the bronzers that I was using. So first off, I've talked about this one time and time again. It's in my project pan. It is the Makeup by Mario Soft Sculpt Transforming Skin Enhancer in the shade medium. If I can get this open. I haven't used this in quite a while, but I will say that this kind of ruled my year before I found its replacement, I guess you could say. So this one is going to be a little bit, for lack of a better term, greasier, but I don't find that's an issue for my oily skin because it is still such a thin formula, even for it being more on like that greasy side, and you get tons of pigmentation out of this one, so you need the smallest amount of this product. It's kind of like this balmy texture. They do market this as using it on bare face, like not having any foundation or whatever. You can do that, but I liked using it with foundation and concealer and stuff like that, and it still worked very well. Now, the one that kind of replaced it was this one for Makeup by Mario. This is the liquid version of, I would say, the liquid version of this one. What is this called? The Bronzing and Shaping Serum. I have this in the shade medium. You can see how much I've used of this, and when I first got it, I will be honest with you guys, I tried it and I was like, this is trash. I was like, this doesn't do anything for my skin. But the interesting thing is that this has a doe foot as well as having a pump. And for some reason, I find the pump works extraordinarily better than the doe foot for me. And I think it's because I can actually use more product at one time, which I think is necessary for my complexion and necessary for this formula. So it's a very thin gel-like texture, but it has a good amount of pigmentation. foundation while still being slightly more on the sheer side. When I first started using this again, I felt like this didn't really give me enough color, but where I find that this shines the most is where it brings color back into my skin in order to prep it for more products. Let me explain that. So I'll go in with my foundation with my concealer. So basically my skin looks flat. It's like all one color. I will take my brush, really work it in there, and I'll start to sculpt like my forehead and the tops of my cheeks, and it brings back that warmth, that bronziness, and it just looks so natural and incredible. It never looks heavy on my skin. I love the way that this creates a little bit of that foundation, and I love building on top of it with other products. Sometimes I find that if I layer a very pigmented bronzer, like a cream or liquid, with a pigmented powder bronzer, it ends up looking too muddy. That never happens. I can replace any cream or liquid bronzer with this one and then top it with like a powder bronzer, and it looks flawless on the skin. It is so, so good. This is definitely one of the products that I did not expect to like as much as I did, and I'm very happy that I gave this one a try because it truly has kind of like changed the makeup game for me. And it's one of those very subtle changes that I made this year that just kind of ties my looks together better. Another liquid bronzer, this Say Dew bronzer. I have two shades of this, but the one that I have been using recently is the shade Swim. I love the gel cream texture of this. I find that it actually blends really, really well, and it is the perfect amount of pigmentation for me. When it comes to liquid and cream bronzers, I like something that thins out and almost like shears out a little bit, because I find that it gives me less of a chance of getting muddy, and that is a big thing for me when it comes to bronzer. I hate when it like turns out looking super muddy on the skin. It also dries down very nicely. I will say that you have to give it a minute before you go in with any sort of powder, because it can sort of cling to that gel texture. That gel texture takes a little bit longer to actually dry down, but that's not an issue for me because I like letting my makeup dry between layers, you know? If you are new to a liquid bronzer, I would highly recommend trying this one out. And lastly, for my cream bronzers, I do have this Milani Cheek Kiss in the shade 120 Spilling Tea. When I first tried this product out, I did try the shade that was darker than this, like one step up, and I was like, whoa, it's too much for me. So I did end up trying this shade, and it is perfect. I would say that this is a little bit less greasy of a texture than that Makeup by Mario Skin Enhancer, and it is the same amount of pigmentation, but it's super blendable. I think that if you have oily skin and you have reservations when it comes to cream products, this one may be a hit or miss for you. If you like cream products, I think that this one is kind of like the gold standard when it comes to texture. It does have that blendability, it has that creaminess to it to where it's easy to blend the pigmentation out, but it's not too greasy to where it's gonna slip and slide all over the face. Again, I like to use this kind of like as that shaping foundational type of bronzer, but it's also really lovely to use on its own. My only powder bronzer that I wanted to mention, because I felt like it was the one that truly stood out to me this year, even though I used a ton of different powder bronzers, the NYX Buttermelt bronzer. This is in the shade number 3, Deserve Butter. This has that rosy tone. I'm sure you guys have seen this all over the place. It definitely has high color payoff, so you want to go in with a light hand. I like to tap my brush in, tap it on a paper towel, and then go in onto my skin. It does have a scent to it. It's kind of like this sweet scent, which I could do without, but it also doesn't tend to irritate my skin, so I'm okay with it. But I just love the rosy tone to this one because it still looks natural without making my skin look super sallow. Whenever I go for more of a cool tone look, I tend to gravitate towards this one. I also sometimes like to use this if I feel like my makeup is starting to look a little bit too warm. Maybe I went in with too warm of another powder bronzer, then I will just kind of counteract it with this one. It's such a great formula. I truly think that it is incredible, but I will say these are hard to travel with. I did travel with my first one and it shattered, so I have not traveled with this since then. Yeah, that's the only con for me. Next, we have blushes, and I used a ton of blushes. I would say the majority of the new products that I tried this year were blushes, but these are going to be the ones that I found that I reached for without really thinking throughout 2024. And first, we're going to talk about some liquid blushes. This one from L'Oreal. like blew me out of the water. It's so good. It is the Lumi number 601 Dewy Worth It. Now there are two different finishes of this. There's the dewy one and then there's like a shimmer one. I just got sent a shimmer one. I haven't tried it yet, but this one specifically was so good for me. If you like more of a beige, subtle pink looking or like subtle peachy pink looking blush and you're a similar complexion to me, this would be the perfect one. This gave me the perfect amount of color without being like this crazy pink peach balm on my skin. I love the creamy texture of this. I find that this has incredible color payoff while also being very blendable. Something I also really love about liquid blushes for the most part versus cream blushes is that liquid blushes tend to actually dry down. So if you have oily skin and you are a little bit more hesitant when it comes to something that's not powder blush, I would say look into liquid blushes because you have more of a chance of that drying down, and this dries down and it layers beautifully with powder blushes. My other favorite liquid blush of the year was the CL Blush and Protect SPF 50 in the shade Kirsty or Kirsty. I still don't know how to say it and I say it both ways every time, but this is a beautiful shade. As you can see, it's going to be more of that darker pinky beige shade, but it looks incredible on the skin. Again, it's kind of like this natural flush on the skin and it adds a little bit of brightness without being just like bam in your face. I love that this has an SPF 50. It is a mineral SPF, but they do it so well. It still blends really well. This is very almost runny, and if you know mineral sunscreens, you know those can be like very thick. This is nowhere near that texture. I find that this one glides beautifully, blends beautifully on the skin. I just love everything that I've tried from CL so far, and this one really had my heart this year. Another cream blush that I love, the Tower 28 cream blush in, well, now it's the shade Finest Hour, but when this first launched as a limited edition blush with the Kung Fu Panda, which is what I have, it was Dumpling Hour, which I thought was so cute. If you have been wanting to dabble in red blushes, like specifically cream blushes, because they're a little easier to work with when it comes to color or like pigmentation, this one is the perfect one. It's definitely a little bit more creamy. Some people find that this like slips and slides on their skin. I don't find that. I think that if you go in with a light hand and you spread it very thinly on the skin, it looks beautiful. It definitely gives you a little bit of that dewy finish, a little bit of that glow, so be prepared. But I think that this sets down really well with powder as well, so I never have issues with it. This is the perfect red blush. It looks like a natural flush, and again, it blends on top of itself really well. Like if you want to sandwich it, do this, then powder, and then this on top. It looks beautiful. My two most favorite powder blushes, which I'm not going to go on and on about because I feel like I mention it in every video, the Haus Labs Fire Moon blush. This is in my project pan. It really ignited my love for beige blushes. This is going to be slightly warmer of a beige blush, but still looks incredible on the skin. I have a little bit of it on right now, and it always just gives me that perfect flush that I'm always looking for. I think it adds a little bit of beigey peach to the skin, and I eat it up. It's so good. It looks beautiful on more tanned skin, and it also looks great on my skin tone currently. This is super pigmented, so I would say one little tap and then blend it into the skin and then work your way up from there, but it is the best shade. I just can't say enough good things about this formula and this color. And on the flip side, if you like the Haus Labs Fire Moon blush, but you find it's a little bit too warm, or maybe you're looking for a cooler counterpart, this one. This is the Fenty Cheeks Bacon Cakes. I had no intentions of picking these up, but when I went to Sephora one time, I swatched them, and the way that these felt so incredibly buttery, I just couldn't deny the fact that I needed one of these in my collection. And this was the only shade, and still is the only shade that I've really been interested in. It is beautiful. It's kind of, again, like this cooler toned beige blush, a little bit more on like the mauvey pinky side of things, but it looks incredible incredible. It really complements my skin tone, and I love how buttery this feels on the skin. Really high color payoff again, so very light hand with this one. It's definitely that blush that I reach for whenever I'm like, I don't know which blush to wear, what to pair with this eye makeup look, because it's very universal for me. I feel like I had an entire love affair with powders this year, and I really honed in on the types of powders that I enjoy and different techniques that work for me. And starting off, I really loved this Huda Beauty loose powder in the shade Peach Pie specifically. If you have a medium or darker skin tone and you want something that like brightens up your under eyes without it being like a stark white, this is perfect for that. Everyone knows that the Huda Beauty powders are just elite. They're nice and finely milled. They really mattify the skin. But I find that while this mattifies my skin, it doesn't cover up what's going on underneath the skin. You know how sometimes when you bake, it just like gets rid of your blush and bronzer? That doesn't happen. And even if that does start to happen a little bit, like I find that my blush is a little muted out, I can go on top with whatever cream product I use underneath, and it never looks cakey and it doesn't like get weird. You know what I mean? Like sometimes if powders are mixed with a cream or a liquid or something, it just gets that weird texture. That doesn't happen with this one. And in that same vein, the Laura Mercier just original powder in the translucent has been one of my go-tos for brightening the under eyes. This is if I want like a very bright look, I will bake with this. I find that my skin just looks so airbrushed when I use this. This doesn't have any sort of irritating scent, and I almost feel like my skin looks better as I wear my face of makeup whenever I set it with this one. It just really works with my oils very well. And I also started to use this one also from Laura Mercier, but this is the Ultra Blur powder in the rose shade. So it does have a slightly like pinky tone to it, but it's not too much. Like it doesn't make my skin look weird or anything like that. It truly just gives me a little bit of brightening and I don't know, almost this like fresh face look. I think the Ultra Blur most definitely adds more blurring, if you can believe it. I find that my whole face looks really airbrushed whenever I use the Ultra Blur powders. They're great. I have both of these in a travel size as well as the translucent Ultra Blur in a travel size. I travel with them all the time. Like I said, 2024, I traveled a ton and I brought at least one of my Laura Mercier powders with me. They are just incredible. As far as finishing powders, you guys may know the lore of this one. This is the Laura Mercier pressed Ultra Blur powder, and as you can see, this one I had to repress because I traveled with this to Japan back in August, and when I came home it completely shattered. So I have since pressed it together and I've been using it again. It's the best. It's basically the Ultra Blur loose powder but in a pressed form, but this is perfect whenever I want to like touch up my makeup. This again is a great finishing powder. So I'll go in, do all of my makeup, and if I feel like my skin, I just want it to be a little bit more blurred all over, I'll take a big fluffy brush, swirl it into this, and just do a light dusting all over the skin. And that always gives me such a beautiful blurred look to the skin. It's great. I do this almost every single time I get on camera, either with this one or with this powder. This is a Kosas Cloud Set Comfy, or Cloud Set finishing powder in the shade Comfy. That was so hard to say. So I recently purchased a new one during the Sephora sale, or actually no, I purchased this during Black Friday on Kosas's website because I did have a mini of this and I completely used that one up. It is beautiful. If you're looking for something that gives you very minimal setting to where it kind of keeps your makeup looking how you want it to look when you finish it, but you don't want it to add any extra mattifying, this is perfect. So it's going to freeze your makeup where it is, and it's going to also delay your oils from coming through. Sometimes I'll go in with like a loose powder if I want more mattifying, and then I'll go in with the fluffy brush and dust all over the skin, and my skin looks so natural, so healthy. It definitely does not keep my oils at bay all day. Like, it's not going to be the longest lasting powder, but if you're not looking for something that's going to keep your makeup frozen for like 16 hours, this is perfect. It's going to keep my oils for the most part away, but also still give me such a healthy glow to the skin. My go-to setting spray, the one trusty setting spray that I've loved all year, the One Size setting spray Until Dawn. This is incredible. It's going to be a finishing spray and I guess a setting spray as well. It's basically hairspray for your face. And I know that sounds scary, but it does not irritate my skin whatsoever, and it keeps my makeup all day. I will use this for every single event. I did use it for every single event of 2024, but I'll also use it on a daily basis if I'm being honest. And also when I film for you guys, I'm sitting under a bunch of lights. It gets hot, I get oilier, but this will keep my makeup on the entire time. Okay, so I want to talk about a couple of single shadows, eyeshadows. This was a little bit difficult because I really played around with a ton of eyeshadows this year, but when I looked at my collection and I really narrowed it down to the things that really impressed me and I just loved this year, my favorite single powder eyeshadows definitely have to go to Clionadh. Clionadh Cosmetics, they make such incredible formulations. They make glittery eyeshadows, they make duochrome eyeshadows, they make satiny eyeshadows. Like, just look at how absolutely insane these are. Like, they are so good. Their duochromes are just the best. I'm wearing some on my eyes right now, and they just give you the most complex looking eyeshadow look with minimal effort. And if you guys know me, I love a multitasking dual dimensional eyeshadow look when I only have to use one product. These are incredible. I first received Clionadh during the Creators and Friends trip back in April, I believe. And since then I have purchased a ton of them, like a lot of these. I have 3 of their eyeshadow palettes. I just love Clionadh Cosmetics. They are incredible, definitely pricier, but they are an indie brand. And I can say from my experience, it's definitely worth it because you will not find anything at like Sephora that comes even close to how unique these are. Next are some single cream shadows, and the first one being the Kulfi Zari Eyes Cream Shadow in the shade Sona Sona. This one, from the moment I laid my eyes on it, the moment I swatch it, the moment that I put it on my eyes, I was done. I was like, oh, okay, so this is gonna be a favorite for the year. It is a beautiful eyeshadow topper. You can use it alone as well. I personally love to use it as an eyeshadow topper on top of any like matte brown shade. I think it looks incredible. You can build these up. They have this very thin, almost like moussey texture, but as they get older, they do dry down a little bit. Like, they do get a little hard. However, that doesn't seem to affect the pigmentation. So I have some that are quite old and the texture isn't as moussey and creamy, but they still deliver just as much color payoff as when I first got them. The shade Bronze Brocade, that is one of my favorite one and done eyeshadows. And if you have oily lids, this one you don't have to worry about because it really stays on the lids. It almost dries down like a film, but not in a bad way, in a way that it like is gonna be on there. It's gonna stay put. Charlotte Tilbury's cream eyeshadow Amber Gold has been my go-to. Again, this is one that's in my project pan and I love this one. If you are someone that thinks that taupes are a little bit too cool tone, a little too intense on your face, but you want something that kind of gives a similar look and feel, this one in Amber Gold definitely is going to be a warmer tone, but it gives you that perfect like wash of color where it almost looks like Are you wearing something? Are you not wearing something? But you are wearing something, because I see like a little bit of satiny sheen to the eyes. You know what I mean? The perfect eyeshadow for that. I love the moussey texture of this one. Blends incredibly easily with your fingers as well. This was a very quick favorite for me, and I used it all throughout 2024. It is the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes palette. I got the relaunch, so I think that the formula is a little bit different from the original that had launched like I think last year, or not last year at this point, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I don't know. But this is perfect. It has all of the shades you need. When I first saw this, when it originally launched, I was like, oh, I'm not gonna like that. It's not gonna show up on my skin tone. It's gonna be too cool. But no, I was completely wrong. This is perfect. Every single shade shows up on my skin tone. It looks so natural, and these almost blur into nothing onto the eyes. They are so easy to work with. And I love that we get a bunch of different eyeshadow toppers here that all look very different from each other. Sometimes I find that some eyeshadows, like shimmer shadows or eyeshadow toppers, just are too different where it doesn't really make sense in the palette, or they all look the same. These all look very different from each other. I really appreciate this palette because it has done wonders in terms of allowing me to make so many different eyeshadow looks, and it looks great for all occasions. This is definitely like the one that I reach for the most whenever I know that I want something that looks a little bit more like I'm going for more of an eyeshadow heavy makeup look, you know, maybe more glam, but I want to ensure that it looks good every time. And this is definitely going to be my favorite discovery in terms of eyeshadow palettes of the year. It is the Surratt Beyond Beige eyeshadow palette. And when I first saw this, I received this again at a Creators and Friends trip. I was like, oh, it's cute. And I was like, okay, it's kind of boring. I might gift this to somebody, but I tried it and I can't begin to explain to you guys how like brain boggling this is, because it almost looks like, at least on my skin tone, almost looks like I'm not wearing eyeshadow, but I am wearing eyeshadow. Like it looks like I have built-in eyeshadow. You know how like cartoon characters, they have the same clothes on, the same makeup, and it just like looks like it all goes together? That's this palette for me. Let me know if that makes sense to you. They are this Japanese slurry, the texture of it. So it's interesting because they feel very creamy, and they almost look like they don't have a lot of pigmentation, but once you blend it on to the eyes with a brush, they give you great pigmentation without being too much. Like you can build on top of it, and I think that's one of the reasons why it kind of looks like you're not wearing eyeshadow, because it's like a slow build. I can use this anytime, and every single time I'm like, yeah, that's a good eyeshadow day. Like your eyeshadow looks great. It's really doing something for me. And I have bought several different Surratt eyeshadows since trying this one because I was just so incredibly impressed with this formula, as well as like the way it looked on my eyes. Just a couple of mascaras here, and this one comes at no surprise to you guys. It is the mascara that is on my eyes like 99.9% of the time. It is the Hair and Make Long and Curl Mascara Advanced Film. Holds my curl all day. It does not smudge. Well, actually, I did notice during the summertime, if I wore this for like, I don't know, 10 plus hours, I did have some slight smudging, but other than that, this wears incredibly well. For the most part, does not smudge, never flakes on me. I do have to go in with a separate mascara remover, but that's not an issue for me. It really elongates my lashes and it gives me nice volume. It just looks incredible every single time. It makes it look like I have like millions of lashes. I just curl my lashes and I put this on, and it is gonna be the best mascara you ever use. And one that's gonna be easier to access if you are in America. This one's from Sephora. This is the Love the Lift waterproof version, and this is one of the very few waterproof Western mascaras that actually like hold a curl for me. I'm wearing it today, and this one holds a curl. It looks really great. A lot of definition as well. I like the brush on this because it is going to be that curved brush, and that allows me to really get the product in there. I like this more when it's a little bit older because it is a little bit drier, but even when it's fresh and collection brand new. It's still really good. My number one eyeliner for 2024 is the Makeup by Mario, the Perfect Brown Eyeliner. This is a brand new one because I finished one up. I talked about it in my Project Pan again, but this is truly the Perfect Brown Eyeliner. It's not too light to where it's like, that's a brown eyeliner and it looks out of place with my black lashes and my black brows, you know? It kind of added a little bit of that definition for a wing without being a stark black liner. I felt like this just looked softer on my skin tone and it just almost made my brown eyes pop a little bit more. I love how usable this brush on the other end is. It really is the perfect density to where it actually moves the product around and you can really wing it out if you want to before it sets down, and it definitely sets down. I love using this on my tight line as well. It's just seriously the most perfect eyeliner. I don't find that I have crazy transfer, it doesn't smudge and stuff like that, and it creates the most perfect wing because it's nice and creamy, and then after I'm finished like brushing it out and winging it out, it sets down, stays all day. A couple of tools that I do also want to mention, one of them being a newer addition to my makeup collection, is this one from Surratt. I got this during the Black Friday sale. The Surratt Eyelash Curler. I heard so many things about this on TikTok. I had to try it for myself. It is going to be a slightly less intense curve, which is perfect for more of my flat profile. This opens up so much, so I find that if I'm using cluster lashes or maybe if you use strip lashes and stuff, this will easily like press both of them together without having to like wiggle around, you know, and this truly gives me such a long lasting, very curly curl for the lashes without looking crimped. Also, my Shiseido eyelash curler, beautiful. I've been using that one for years. I was using that one exclusively before using the Surratt one, so I did want to mention that it is the best. Again, really perfect for more of a flatter profile like mine, but it gives you a beautiful curl without being crimped. Next, I want to talk about a couple of brushes, one of them being Sigma brushes, specifically this soft bristle collection. I think that these are only a few of the brushes in that collection, but all of these I get so much use out of. This one is by far my favorite one. I love this like paw brush to it. It applies all of my cream bronzers, my cream blushes, my liquid bronzers and blushes perfectly. It is incredible. You can also use this for powder, like to bake your face. You just like dip it in loose powder and bake your face. It's the best. These bristles are actually so nice and soft. They are so durable as well. Not a single one is like loose or anything like that. And that is actually because they created a technology where the ferrule actually like is screwed onto it versus just like being glued, which I think is incredible. I love this brush for concealer. All of these are just so usable and they're also very, very versatile. I have been loving my Sigma brushes. I do have a code with them as well. It is an affiliated code, but I always leave that in the links down below in case you guys are interested in using them. But this collection specifically, the soft core brush line, it's the best. Of course, I can't go talking about brushes without talking about my BK Beauty brushes. I have multiple of, I'm pretty sure every single brush that I own from them because I love them so much. So my most used, I will say, is the Angie Hot and Flashy A506 brush. I like using this for my color correctors and my concealers. This mimics what your fingertip would do, like how it would blend out your concealers. And I also am obsessed with the 109 brush. This one I use in the same vein as that other paw brush from Sigma. It's so soft. This one is slightly more fluffy than that one, so I find that this almost deposits and blends the product a little bit faster. I love my Nikki LaRose brushes. These are so multitasking and just incredible. I love my fluffy brushes for my finishing powder. I love my Ingold brush for my blush and bronzer. I will again have everything linked down below for you guys, but BK Beauty is that girl. Like truly is that girl. And even the eye brushes, like they're constantly dirty, and I can't show you more because all of them are dirty because I'm always using them. But BK Beauty brushes are elite, truly. All right, guys, I think that was everything for our 2024 beauty favorites. These are all of the products that I just had an entire love affair with in 2024. Truly, they are the products that I feel like really shaped my makeup in the last year and also kind of helped me narrow down my specific preferences, I guess, the way that I really like my makeup to look. Before then, I was doing a ton of review videos on basically anything that was new, but last year I made a commitment to myself to really hone in on like what works for me, and I'm so glad that I have been doing that recently. And I hope in 2025 I can bring you guys more videos that are more specific to my like wants versus like just talking about everything that's new. So if you guys did like this video, I do have another one that I did in the summertime called Best of Beauty 2024 so far. I'll link it right here for you guys in case you're interested in seeing that one. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.